for those of you that are watching live, I am Callie Lovvorn. I'm the owner of Clear Fork Press and the imprint Spork, that is a children's imprint, and we try to publish books that we feel like make people think and aren't something that you might see from more of a mainstream publisher. So this is my lovely guest today, Samantha. And Samantha, it says Samantha's iPhone. So I almost said Samantha iPhone, like that was your name, but it's not.
Should be. It's not.
It's Gassman. And so I cannot believe, like, as we sit here today, we are celebrating the 1-year anniversary of your book, Dear Rainbow Baby, coming out, which is such, I can't believe that it's on, like, at the same time, I can't believe it's only been a year, but then at the same time, it feels like it has been a year, I'm sure it feels like a longer time for you because you moved in this last year, and
yes,
have had so much going on, and I'll let you tell a little bit more about that. But today is National Rainbow Baby Day. And if you're not watching this live, the day that we're recording this is on August 22nd, which is designated as National Rainbow Baby Day. And for me, I know personally, I had a rainbow baby. And so if you're not familiar with the term rainbow baby is a baby that was born after childhood loss. So it's like pregnancy loss or stillbirth are mainly what is used in connection with it. And so my first pregnancy was right after September 11th. There was a lot of stuff going on that tells you how long ago that was. It's a different world, and my ex-husband was in the military, so it was a very scary time for us. And I made it to a certain point, actually pretty far, and my baby's heartbeat just stopped one day. And that day, I say all this to say that I think that we do have National Rainbow Baby Day, which is definitely a day to celebrate having a child after that. But then I think for me, I still acknowledge the day that I lost my baby. His name was Tim, and the day that his due date would have been. Are 2 days that I say it's like most things with grief, like there are times when it hits harder than others, but I still acknowledge, I don't think I've ever passed those marks without like saying a little, hope you're doing great in heaven, or, thing, and just acknowledgement. And, but I do love the fact that the ones that came after, in my case, my rainbow baby, Logan, is about to turn 21 years old. And he would not be here if I had not lost my first child, because they would have overlapped, which is, I know that happens with a lot of people. And so I think it's nice to celebrate that, like that rainbow. And I think I could be wrong, but I believe that it is called a rainbow baby after God's promise, like, that he put the rainbow after Noah's Ark. And I think that is the association of the rainbow with the concept. So for you, Sam, is it the same way where you acknowledge the days like that? Or do you, as you've gotten further in grief and grief is different for everybody, and it comes and goes in unexpected ways. And so we know that that's not really a measurable thing, but is it kind of the same for you too?
Well, it's interesting for us because August 22nd is also my daughter's birthday, and she is our rainbow baby.
She got it right. Like
she did.
She got, she knew what she was supposed to do, right?
She did. And so, she turns 3 today on August 22nd, with it also being National Rainbow Baby Day and the first anniversary of the book. So for us, this day is especially important because we're celebrating not only her as a rainbow baby, but her birthday. And so when I think about this day and what it means, it's a very joyful occasion for myself and my family.
Yeah,
When it comes to grieving the loss, every November on the day that I lost the baby is when it tends to hit me the hardest,
me too.
particularly because I was we just had our third baby actually in June, and I was about the same time along with her in November last year as I was with the one that we lost. And so in fact, I think it was almost exactly down to the week was I was 8 weeks in that week of November. So that was even though in my mind I knew that rationally that there was not, I mean, there's always a chance of losing another one,
Right. Right.
but like once we got past that week, it was like, oh, okay, so it's not at least we've got past that. Um, and fortunately, we have our pot of gold baby. She's sleeping right now, in fact, and hopefully stays that way for the course of the interview.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's really those 2 days. It's the 22nd of August, and then that week in November.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it is, I mean, it's such a joyous thing now. I'm sure when you look at your rainbow baby and think like, this is why I wrote the book. This is why,
Hmm.
you know. And so let's talk a little bit about the book, because the book is a very unique book in the publishing, like in the children's book world.
Hmm.
And I know that when we acquired it, I fell in love with it immediately because I kind of felt that hit of like, I get it. I always joked that Logan was the most photographed baby in utero. And we didn't have the fancy 3D, I mean, it was a totally different way, but because I was so sick and had so many problems, I think we did like he had like 22 sonograms done on him or something. Like it was just this really really funny amount. And I said, like, I always kind of thought that was like God's way of helping my anxiety, because I didn't have to ask for those pictures. That was just part of the protocol to make
Hmm.
sure that I was doing well. And so that reassurance was amazing. And so I know that I can relate to kind of just like when you get to that milestone and you're like, oh, am I going to be okay? And I think that what,
Do we have to highlight public notices as ads?
yes,
Okay.
one of the things that really I noticed, and of course, my miscarriage was a long time before yours, and that, and I talk about this in lots of things because like autism was talked about different, like, things have changed so much over the last few years, and in mental health things have changed. But I know, like, when I had my miscarriage, you just didn't talk about that. Like that
Yeah.
was not, nobody wanted to hear about that. And it certainly was not treated like, well, why are you sad about that?
Right.
Why, like, just go on and get pregnant again. And as I look back over my life, I know that was one of the hardest, like, punches to the gut that I had in my life,
Hmm.
like up to this point. And so do you feel like when it happened to you that it was kind of the same thing, or did you feel more support? Um, what did it, what did that grief process look like for you when it happened?
Well, there's a lot of different aspects to it. I think one of the most memorable for a negative reason is that something they don't tell you about when that happens is that you get to go to the lab every week, and they continue to jab you and like measure your levels to make sure that your body's kind of returning to normal. And they had to do that for weeks and weeks and weeks on the anniversary of the miscarriage. And it was terrible because every week, you may be doing better in the grief, and then you go back for another jab, and then they're like measuring your levels, and it's very you know, it's a medical setting, so everything's very sterile, but like the conversations feel sterile as well. It's like, oh, yep, you're here to make sure that your levels are good. And it's like, yeah, but there's a whole lot more that goes into it emotionally than just like, okay, let's track this number down to its normal rate. And so just from that aspect, like remembering the anniversary every week with a jab to the arm when I should have been going in for more scans or like, you know, prenatal appointments or the glucose. I mean, even though nobody likes that, I still would rather have, I'd still
Right.
rather do
Then
that than
that,
go in
yeah.
for another reason. Right. So that part was really hard. And you know, people just don't really know what to say. Like I had a family member say, oh, well, it was only 8 weeks, so it wasn't a real baby. Or, you know, oh, well, there must have been something wrong with it, so that's why that happened. I'm like, okay, well, those things may be true, right? But
That
that's
doesn't
not
help it.
helpful.
No.
Yeah, that's not helpful. And I
Well,
also hate, just as a society, that we provide the advice to women to not mention anything about the pregnancy until after like the safe zone, right? Like after that 12-week mark. And the
mhm,
reason behind that is because in the event of a miscarriage, which is more likely to happen in that first trimester, you know, you don't, the advice is there so that you don't have to go back and say, oh, well, actually, you know, we don't have
right.
this baby anymore. And I understand that, and that may work for some people, but I don't like that advice at all. And here's why. If you're not able to tell the people that you love the most that you're having a baby, and you're not able to tell them later if you've lost the baby, then what? Then you've isolated yourself,
Right.
and you've made the situation for
You have a
yourself
secret.
so much more difficult. Yeah. And so because this was my second pregnancy that this happened, I was not even thinking that a miscarriage would happen at all. I was very overconfident. I hadn't had a problem before. I didn't think there would be one then. I was a runner. I was fit. I didn't even think about that, you know, 20% of miscarriage or pregnancies end in miscarriage. And I certainly didn't think it would happen to me. So when we got pregnant that second time, I told my family and I told my close friends. And honestly, I'm glad that I did, because when I had to go back to them and explain what happened, I had that support from my family and my friends. And I think, again, that advice to keep it to yourself, it just perpetuates that isolation that we feel in the event of a miscarriage.
Yeah. I would totally agree with that. I think it, I think that that spotlights what is missing sometimes in mental health help, is that we do tend to, and people don't know what to say. I mean, it's like having cancer, like I had people when I was diagnosed, I had people that were amazing and came out of the woodwork and really, like, even if it was a small thing, like had their way of showing support. But then I had friends that were very close friends that didn't talk to me for like the entirety that I had it, because and after after I got done with chemo, and I reached out to one of them and I said, like, I miss you. And they're like, well, I just didn't know what to say.
Right.
And so, I mean, I do think I understand that, and like you said, like, I get that. I get the thought process and I understand why, but then at the same time, I don't think you always have to say something to show support.
Right.
I think that there's other ways to be stuff. And I had I had very rough pregnancies with both of my boys, and I was in the hospital for 3 months with Logan, and then with Ben I was on home health for 5 months, and I was forced, well, not forced, because that's not really true, but it was strongly advised for me to get my tubes tied when I was giving birth. Like when I gave birth to Ben, I had my tubes tied immediately after that. I went into surgery immediately after. And that was strong medical advice from my high-risk pregnancy doctor. He was like, I just don't think you can survive another pregnancy. I don't think your body can be equipped. And I do have problems now that were a result of that. But then I got the comments of like, oh, well, you have two healthy boys. Why would you want any more? Like, because that I wanted a girl, like I'm not gonna lie, I wanted a girl. I called Ben Molly for like 4 months when I was pregnant, I wanted that girl, but I think that there is we as a society sometimes like put stuff on women that's not really fair. Like, and like you said, like I think sometimes people feel like they're helping to say these things, but it's just like a married couple that has been married for 5 or 6 years and have not been pregnant. People are like, well, when are you going to have kids? Well, you have no
Right.
idea, because they may have tried to have kids, or they may. And so my thing is always like, what is your goals? Like, what do you want to do? Like, are you wanting to stay here? I don't care if you have kids or not. And I said that to somebody the other day, and they're like, will you please tell my family that? Like,
Well, and that's something that I learned from reading comments that people sent me about the book in response to the book was, that they felt seen by the book, and that they were sharing these very personal journeys with me. And something that came out of that that really kind of like put this point forward is that you never really know someone's history. And so seemingly harmless questions like that can actually be very hurtful. Like we just had our third baby, and they're like, oh, what are you building, a soccer team? Like, yeah, that's really funny. Like, and why is it anyone's business, how many children you have or don't have, or what you're trying to do or not do. And particularly when there's been a miscarriage or stillbirth or something else like that, it's like, you're hitting on topics that you wouldn't normally ask of someone if it were any other condition. But because pregnancy is so visible, people feel the need to comment on it or not comment on it. It's like,
right.
it's just one of those things where you can't help but notice. And so then folks feel able or compelled to share their thoughts with you on, on what you should do and not do.
Right. So I'm glad that you said that, because I would like to talk about like when the book came out. Well, there were right away, there were some really cool things that happened. And that was, I think that goes back to the conversations that we had before the book came out about how this was a different type of book, and how it was for the parent and for the child. And it's, really not something that had been done before, because it addressed grief very head on for a child. And for me, one of the most exciting things was that you had a story that ran in your local newspaper, and then it got picked up by the AP press.
Yeah.
And so it was like everywhere, because the AP press like funnels everywhere. So it was so funny. And like, it was funny for me because, having a newspaper and knowing people that have AP press feeds, like I'm like looking at their front page of their newspaper, and there we are, and so it was actually picked up by our local NPR and our local TV station. And I was like, I wonder if they even realize like that it's actually a local story. Like, like there's a local connection. But I know that was fun for me, but how did you feel about it? Like, how was it? I mean, because if you Googled it, it was everywhere.
Everywhere. It was insane, Callie, because so I did the interview with the reporter in Sumter, South Carolina, which is where we were stationed before we moved here to Alabama. And it was, a quick interview. It was like maybe 10, 15 minutes. And, the next day or maybe next couple of days, it ran in our local paper, the item out of Sumter. And I picked up my copy for me and my husband and my family, and just like sent them off, whatever. And I was like, okay, well, that was a cute, like fun little thing that happened. And then, yeah. And then I got a Facebook message from someone, and she's like, oh, I'm asking about your book because I saw it in my paper and want to know when I can order it, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, well, where do you live? And she's like, oh, I'm up here in Pennsylvania. And I was like, Pennsylvania? Like, how did you get this newspaper from South Carolina? And she was confused, and I was confused. She's like, well, no, I saw it in my paper. And I was like, what? And then that's what prompted me to like look online. And like you said, it was like 190 different hits for that story. And when I started looking at where it had gone, it was clear that it had been picked up by the AP and distributed over the wire. And so many places across the country picked it up as a story. And it was incredible because all of a sudden I had these messages from people all around the country saying how they were excited about the book coming out, how they had a daughter or a friend or a sister who had gone through that and they can't wait to gift it to them. I even had someone contact me about their daughter who was having a rainbow baby, and she included a copy of the book, like the book itself, in her maternity photo shoot. And so there's photos of her, like,
A
however
lovely
many months
idea.
pregnant. Yeah, right, with
Yeah,
the book. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like that's
that's
wow, like what an
cool.
impact that's having on people where they're taking like personal family photos with this book that I wrote. I mean, it was really incredible. And the stories that came out of it from folks who were sharing, their journeys was so inspirational. And really, I mean, as an author, that's the best thing you can hope to have happen, is
Yeah.
that people connect with your work and that they enjoy it and it helps them in some way. For a lot of the folks who contacted me, they had been looking for a book specifically, for a rainbow baby parent, and they couldn't find it. And there's really nothing out there. And so when they found this book, they're like, oh, like, yes, this is what I wanted, because it fits that very particular niche of, this audience. And so
Yeah.
it's been a really great experience. And I'm just so glad that this book has been helpful to people.
Oh, I love that. And I love that you say it like that, because that was the dream that I think both of us kind of had with the book, of like, that it would be a tool for people to express that, and
Mhm.
express and stuff. And so yeah, I think that was amazing. I think it's also great that these people reached out and said like how much, because it's, I've always said, like, as a writer, because I wrote a column for years that was in the paper, and I always said it was so funny because I would not get any feedback at all on my column for like 2 months.
Mhm.
And I would write a column and I would get like 7 or 8 people would say, "Oh, I love that." So and I found like most of the time the ones that really got like feedback were the ones that I wrote about the kids doing crazy things, or like funny, off the things. But one of the ones that I got the most feedback on was one that I wrote about, that in the middle of a wheat field that is attached to my dad's land, there is a grave, and the farmer literally farms around this grave.
Hmm.
It's a headstone and everything. And I wrote this thing about like like this man, I think, was literally buried where he fell. He was a buffalo hunter, and his horse bucked and he died like in the like when there was really not anything there, and stuff. And so many people wanted to know more about this guy and why he was buried there. But it's like that you hit this like moment of people like, wow, that's fascinating. And I feel like this book has that moment because it sheds light on something that we really don't think about unless we personally have been affected by it.
Mhm.
I'm sure your agent was like, I submitted it to people and they didn't even know what a rainbow baby was.
Oh, absolutely.
Um, and so I think that says, and even in our acquisitions department inside of the company, there was a little bit of a back and forth. Like one of the people working for me was like, why did you acquire that? And I'm like, because I believe in it. Like I believe.
And truthfully, and rather embarrassingly, I didn't know what a rainbow baby was either until it happened to
I
me. I
didn't
had
either.
no idea.
Yeah, I did not either. I'll be completely, and I think it's a little bit more visible now. Like I had a bear,
Mhm.
I think he's been moved, but I had a bear that was one of our distributors put out that was a rainbow baby bear to give to a rainbow baby, which I thought was great. But I think I think it's becoming more of a thing, but you're right. I think unless you really know, you don't know. Um,
Mhm.
Another fun thing that I wanted to mention and talk about was when the Duchess of York read the book on her
Mhm.
YouTube page, which my mother is a huge Queen Elizabeth fan. And so I'm like, Mom, your proximity to Queen Elizabeth got down to like two, like I was like that thing. So what did that, like, how did that come about and what did that look like for you?
That was crazy too. So I'm actually originally from England. You can't tell now because I hide my accent very well. But I was 8 when I moved, and served in the military here in the States. So I'm definitely, true-blooded American, naturalized, of
Mhm.
course. But I still have family out in England. And someone on Facebook, I think, had mentioned to me that they were able to get their book read by Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York. And I was like, well, how did you do that? And she said, well, there's a process on Instagram that you can follow. You contact them, they send you some information, and then you send them the book. And if they want to read it, she'll read it. And if you won't. So I was like, okay, well, let's see how it goes. And so I reached out, and I think it was her administrative assistant or someone who said, yep, here's the address, go ahead and send the book over. And so I went on to Amazon UK. I sent them the book and I waited and I waited and I waited. I didn't hear anything. I was like, oh, well, I mean, that was, a few bucks that I just kind of sent to England. No worries.
Yeah.
And then it's okay. And then, cause I was literally sending it to like Windsor or something. I was
Yeah.
like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, and that's the way I think there's a lot of things that are kind of like that you're like,
Yeah.
maybe you can get this. Yeah.
Exactly. But a couple of months, or maybe a few months later, I got a message that said, oh, by the way, the Duchess plans to read it like tomorrow or the next day or something. And I was like, get out of town. That's amazing. And so I was like refreshing her YouTube channel like constantly that day and trying to figure out when she would post it up. And sure enough, like it popped up and I watched it, and there's the Duchess of York like reading my book. And I mean, talk about just kind of coming full circle. I mean, to have someone of her position and her caliber reading my book when I'm from that country originally, and talking about the book and talking about me, and sharing her comments about it, that was surreal. I mean, I I can't even
Just a
believe
little
it
bit.
happened even now. It's like, it's insane.
Yeah. I can imagine. It just sounds like you said, crazy, and
Yeah. And you
so
can find it still. It's on her YouTube channel, Storytime with Fergie. Just take a look for Dear Rainbow Baby, and there she is reading it. And it's cool. They're filming her reading it, but then they also have like excerpts from the book that they kind of show on the screen as well. So you can see what the amazing illustrations look like that Tim Lange did.
yeah, yeah, that's amazing. That is, I mean, it's just, you know, so cool. So what are you working on now that you have moved from here? I think I know the answer to this, but I'm gonna let you say what the answer is to this.
Well, I'm excited because Callie and I get to work together again on a story called Peanut and Buttercup, which, if you're thinking that sounds completely different from Rainbow Baby, you're right.
It is.
How does this one author have two different books like this? I don't know. It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But so Peanut and Buttercup is a much more humorous story in nature. It's not quite as somber as Dear Rainbow Baby, but it's about a horse named Buttercup who's very sassy. She's overconfident, perhaps, and is
Yeah.
looking forward to her debut race. She's a racehorse. And when she gets to the track, she all of a sudden gets very spooked, as some horses do. And so her trainer thinks it's a great idea to introduce a companion animal, and his name is Peanut, and he's a goat, and he is googly eyed and he's smelly. And she is not a fan of this arrangement, and does
No.
not understand how or why this little goat can be helpful to her in any way. And so the story is about their relationship and how it progresses over the course of the book. And in order for you to find out the ending, you'll have to grab it next year when it comes out.
Yeah. And it's such a fun book to work on. She like you said, her personality, I think both characters' personality has been so fun to mess with how they're interacting and how funny can we make this, and how, thing. And I think I mean, you probably intended it to be this way, but I think it's also like, I really feel like kids can see themselves in both of them,
Mhm.
of like, being stubborn about something and wanting to have a projected outcome. And I've always said I really want a emotionalist support goat. I think that that would be lovely. I
Well,
have a
it's based on, true stories. So not any
yeah.
one specific true story, but several American thoroughbred horses that have gone on to win Kentucky Derbies and such have or had companion animals. And I remember watching a video about this on ESPN. I think it's called Barnyard Buddies or something to that effect.
Oh wow.
And it it was an adorable collection of stories of like racehorses and their pigs, their cats, their goats, their young horses that they befriended, or maybe like the animal befriended them. And one of the animals' names was Pickles. And he was in love with this mare who was a very famous racehorse and would follow her everywhere, would sleep outside her barn, would nuzzle up against her if she let him. And it's like a love story that they tell on this video. I just thought that that was hilarious. And it stuck with me for years. I probably saw that video in like 2015. And so
Mhm.
it took several years for it to come to fruition in a story, but I never forgot it because I just thought it was so adorable. And so I'm really looking forward to this book coming out next year.
Yeah. Me too. I just think it's so fun. It's
I'm gonna have to get different earrings though.
I know you're gonna
I
have to,
can't wear rainbow earrings for my
but
peanut butter cup.
I bet you need to get like peanut butter, like I don't know why I've said peanut butter every time, but like you're gonna have to get like a horse and a goat or
Yeah, or horseshoes or something. Or
something. I don't know. We can I bet we can find something. So um but I am excited. I think it's a great book to show just your range as an author, and how that is, like you said, that you have Dear Rainbow Baby that is a very specific audience, and which I think is one of the best parts about it. But then you are also have this other book that's totally different, but shows your comedic side and your, willingness. And plus it also kind of just shows us like you never know where support's going to come from, and you never know.
Mhm.
And like this thing that annoys you may be what is the best thing for you,
As my rainbow baby can attest with her younger sister.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
She's like, I'm not sure about this.
Yeah. Yeah. Really? Is this in my
Just
best
like,
interest?
I'm the center of attention. What's going on here?
Yeah, I can only imagine, but it's fun. It's so good. I want to wish you again happy Rainbow Baby Day.
Thank you.
And happy birthday to your Rainbow Baby.
Thank you.
And so I hope that anybody that hears this will just think of, like that maybe you have a friend that has had something like this happen, and gifting to them just to say like and like you said, like you're seen.
Hmm.
See you, which is one of the best gifts you can give anybody. So
Yeah,
um I appreciate you spending time with me today.
of
um,
course. Thank you.
I'm gonna finish out our little live.